Thanks, Sanjay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our virtual panel on the role of institutional philanthropy in enhancing the effectiveness of giving. As some of you may know, the Pearl Initiative is the region's leading non-profit business-led organisation commissioned to promote a corporate culture of accountability and transparency as a key driver of business competitiveness. Since the recent public health pandemic, our knowledge-sharing events, including our seminars, workshops and roundtables, are no longer taking place in person, and we are focusing on virtual webinars instead. Of course, we will resume in-person events when circumstances permit. We're covering quite a broad array of topics as part of our wider programme. You can find out more about the webinars we are holding on our events page on our website. We also do upload most of our webinars to our YouTube panel, so in case you've missed any sessions that may have been of interest, you can watch those on demand at your own convenience. Today's webinar is being held as part of our Governance and Philanthropy programme, which was developed in 2017 to build standards and best practices for giving across the Gulf region. The scope of the programme has grown year on year, and today we are focusing on demonstrating the value of institutional philanthropy in enhancing the effectiveness of giving. Philanthropy today takes place in a context that is radically different from the environment in which many of its current practices and behaviours were developed. An intimidating range of forces, such as globalisation, shifting sectoral roles, economic crisis, and pervasive connected technologies, to name just a few, are changing both what philanthropy is called upon to do and how donors will accomplish their work in the future. Collectively, we face a growing sense of crisis on many fronts, and many of the challenges, climate change, education reform, pandemics, entrenched poverty, food security, and much more, don't adhere to political, geographic, disciplinary, or sectoral boundaries. Philanthropy has responded to the shifting landscape, and as the relevance and role of philanthropy has become a more urgent question over the past decade, newer actors and older institutions alike have been striving to be more strategic in a variety of ways. Funders and donors have been pushing to improve impact by clarifying goals, building theories, examining data, and increasingly consulting more often with their partners, peers, and beneficiaries. The bar for performance has likely been raised permanently, along with the rigour with which it's measured. The actions that have gained most traction over recent years have been taken by new leaders who have distanced themselves from the past while launching experiments of many kinds, including venture philanthropy, online giving platforms, market-based approaches, and a resolute focus on narrow objectives. With that being said, our work in the philanthropy realm is certainly not complete. We have a long way to go in terms of philanthropic innovation towards improving effectiveness, efficiency, and responsiveness, while also building on this agenda to include an additional focus on the coordination and adaptation of philanthropic performance. The work to improve performance and to execute with excellence remains a difficult and important pursuit. Focusing on current or existing best practices won't be enough, and operating in isolation certainly won't get us to where we need to be going. The definition of great execution is evolving to marry existing best practices with emerging next practices, principles, and behaviours that are particularly well suited to the dynamic context for philanthropic problem solving. In today's panel discussion, we bring together key actors in the third sector who will share their experiences and their journeys and touch upon how various factors such as collaborations, transparency in reporting and impact evaluation can not only optimise strategic giving, but enhance its long-term sustainability too. Before I hand over to our panellists today, and Mr. Bedo Jaffer for the introductory remarks, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed speakers here today. First on our panel is Mona Isa Al-Gurg, the Director of Retail of Isa Saleh Al-Gurg Group, a multi-divisional conglomerate with 27 companies. The group is active in several industry sectors that include retail, building and construction, industrial, real estate, and joint ventures. Mona is on the board of several non-profit organisations, including the Emirates Foundation for Youth Development, where she works closely with its chairman, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The Isa Saleh Al-Gurg Charity Foundation, Mona is responsible for strategy and initiatives both in the UAE and internationally. Mona is a member of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Sustainability Board, which is mandated to provide innovative and sustainable solutions to refugees in the MENA region. Finally, Mona is a founding board member of NWAE, a non-profit organisation promoting high-impact entrepreneurship in emerging and growth markets. Thank you, Mona, for joining us today. Our second panelist for today is Dana Jafali. Dana Jafali is currently a board member of the Shifa Fund and Director of Business Development at Khalid Jafali Holding Company. Dana also serves as member of the board of EA Jafali and Brothers, Saudi Anaya Health Insurance, and the Help Center in Saudi Arabia. Dana previously held managerial positions at Siemens AG in Germany and Saudi Arabia in human resources and supply chain management. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California and a master's degree from Steinberg-Hochschule Berlin. Thank you, Dana, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our moderator for today's session is Mihaela Nina, founder at Concerto, the impact company TIC. Mihaela is partner at Augmentation X, a business innovation studio that creates novel digital products and solutions aiming to support organizations transform and grow, as well as founder of Concerto, TIC, a boutique sustainability strategy and impact communications advisory firm. Prior to her current roles, Mihaela has been, for more than a decade, dedicated to building growth strategies across a wide spectrum of levels and support organizations, and has supported organizations steering away from the current business as usual paradigm. Her long vision supported her in leading successful projects within the hospitality sector, having developed and driven the largest paid membership program of IHG MENA, as well as restructured and led the membership strategy of the most prominent business club in the region, the Capital Club Dubai. Thank you, Mihaela, for moderating today's session. I'd like to thank our esteemed speakers for joining us today and for taking the time to share the valuable insights on strategic philanthropy. As with all our webinars, we do like to make them as engaging as possible and would encourage you to submit any questions you may have for our panelists using the Q&A function provided as part of the webinar panel. I will now pass the baton on to Badr Jaffer, founder of the Pearl Initiative, for the introductory remarks, who will then pass on to the panel. Thank you, Badr, and thank you everybody for participating today. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Yasmin. And good afternoon to all. Thanks to everybody, of course, for joining this timely discussion on institutional philanthropy. Lovely to see both Muna and Dana, really both incredible champions of what this discussion is about and role models in their own right. Thanks to you both. So listening to Yasmin's intro, I'd just like to say something about the meaning of that term, institutional philanthropy. To me, at least, the term institutional philanthropy could be applied to any kind of giving that's structured, targeted, transparent, accountable, and focused on producing results or impact, regardless of whether we're talking about giving by multinational corporations, a family office, or even a smaller personal initiative. In other words, we're talking about, when we talk about institutional philanthropy, we're more concerned with how giving is being conducted rather than who or what kind of institution is doing giving. Thinking about how we do the business of philanthropy really has never been more important. I regularly commented that for too long, private philanthropic capital has been treated as the forgotten child of the capital system, seen by many as a peripheral player, and in some parts of the world, including in many countries in the MENA region, regarded with a high degree of suspicion. The reality, of course, is that well over $1 trillion of private philanthropic capital, which is more than triple the annual global development aid or humanitarian and development aid budgets combined, is deployed every single year. In the US, over 430 billion was made available in private philanthropy last year alone, will probably be even greater this year with COVID. And closer to home, up to $1 trillion annually is donated in Islamic almsgiving between zakat and sadaqah. And these are, of course, huge sums that dwarf the foreign aid budgets of even the most generous of countries. And there's never been, I think, a more urgent need to ensure that these funds are being deployed as efficiently and effectively as possible, and of course, in accordance with the highest standards of governance. Everybody on this call is, of course, aware of the multitude of challenges that we face here in the region, but also globally. And even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the UN was warning that an additional $2.5 trillion would be needed every year for the next 10 years if the world was going to have a realistic shot at achieving the SDGs by 2030. The events of the last 6 months has only exacerbated that shortfall. The World Bank now estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic could push up to 100 million people into extreme poverty this year alone. Now, where is that money going to come from? Well, there's no doubt in my mind that private philanthropy has a crucial role to play in helping to address some of these challenges, both on its own, but also in partnership or blended with government and business capital. But if we don't start making a greater effort to institutionalize best practices in philanthropy and philanthropic governance, then the impact of a lot of this giving will be blunted at best, and in some instances could even be counterproductive or even destructive. And this is fundamentally why the Pearl Initiative has been operating a dedicated program for governance in philanthropy since 2017, I believe, with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And of course, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Gates Foundation once again for all their encouragement. It's also the reason why I recently partnered with the University of Cambridge to create a new Center for Strategic Philanthropy that focuses exclusively on philanthropy within and from some of the world's emerging markets, including, of course, the Middle East. If you're interested in learning more, then please feel free to reach out to me. So enough from me, and before I give the virtual floor back to Yasmin, I want to thank you all again for supporting the work of the Pearl Initiative, which I sincerely believe is exponentially more relevant today than before we all got slapped around the back of the head with this pandemic. Pearl Initiative team is, of course, working very hard to develop a new strategy that takes into account the new realities that we face and, of course, the opportunities ahead. And your engagement will really be essential for the successful deployment of this work in the coming months and years ahead. Thank you again to our esteemed panelists, and I'll pass it back to Yasmin to take it from here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Badr. Well, I think my role is done here, so I'm going to hand over to Mahela, Mona, and Zana. Thank you once again, and to our panelists today, to our participants today, I really hope you enjoyed the engaging session. And as I said, the question panel is a great opportunity to post your questions to get insights and once in a lifetime opportunity. So thank you. Thanks, Mahela.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Badr, for these insightful introductory remarks. I am personally very much excited about our discussion over the coming 40 minutes. And as Yasmin said, we really aim to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free to drop in your comments, your questions in the chat box, as well as we are going to run a few polls throughout the session, but not to forget that at the end we will also have a Q&A session so that we can respond to any areas that haven't been addressed throughout our panel. So now I think that with Badr putting really everything in context, what we've really seen over the past months with the pandemic, putting an immense stress on our socioeconomic development, is the fact that philanthropy has quickly risen to the challenge and has supported tremendously initially in flattening the curve, and now moving forward in really addressing any inequities which are arising from this crisis. So what we really want to shed light alongside Mona and Dana today, who again I would like to welcome on our panel, is how we can go about institutionalizing philanthropy. How can we be more strategic in our giving strategies, and what areas should we focus on in order to do so? So now with this in mind, let me turn to our speakers and ask them, maybe starting with Mona, to provide us with an overview of their giving strategies, the learnings along the process of institutionalizing philanthropy, and the benefits of doing so.
So thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this vital conversation on institutional giving and philanthropy. I think this is such a vital conversation, not just for my generation, but also for the generations to come, to understand how to institutionalize their giving. So to really answer your question, I would like to take a step back and walk you through the journey, our journey as a as a family business and a group. So I'm the second generation at the Isa Saleh Al Ghur Group, and we this year are celebrating 60 years since the establishment of the group. And so it was established by the chairman, my father, and he's born in the 1920s. So yes, so basically this group was established 60 years ago. In terms of the philanthropy, there was a lot of charity and philanthropy done by the chairman over the decades. And so his personal philanthropy was there, but it was really institutionalized, I would say, 10 years ago. And so the Isa Saleh Al Ghur Foundation was established 10 years ago. Our work really is mainly in geographies such as East Africa, India, the GCC, and our scope of work really is the building of clinics, schools. You know, we've created thousands of scholarships over the years. We've built places of worship. There's a lot of food relief also that goes into our, you know, foundation work. So there's a lot of incredible work that comes out of the Isa Saleh Al Ghur Foundation. The legal system is really a waqf system. So that's really pledged assets into it. So it has a permanent capital. So real estate assets are part of this waqf system. And so, yes, so I experienced a lot of the sort of narratives of this philanthropy firsthand from a very young age. As you can imagine, I used to hear about all the stories that, you know, came out of the chairman and you know, how he developed his giving and his sort of charity strategy. And so it's very important to kind of emphasize on the work that he's done over the decades. But really, you know, it's important to also emphasize on individuals' personal philanthropy. And I think we spoke about this earlier, which is there's the foundation, but there's also my personal philanthropy journey. And so I would say that about 10 years ago, my personal philanthropy was really sort of supporting causes that my parents supported. So let's say 1 or 2 grants per year towards the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, etc. But over the years, I would say that I evolved, and now my grants are much larger. And so I've also evolved in terms of what my passion is towards. So I would say that I'm really very, very passionate about women and girls. I'm also very passionate about social impact. And so that really has evolved over the years into now I have my own scholarship at London Business School for Arab women. We're on to the 5th recipient of this scholarship. I've also provided lots of scholarships towards refugees in Lebanon through Unite Lebanon Youth Project, where you take these brilliant refugees and take them into private institutions, out of the refugee camp into private institutions. So I have also personally evolved over the years in terms of my own personal development. So I have 3 areas really of considerations to talk about. I've now seen enough where I appreciate the importance of impact measurement and sustainability. And I would also say that my capacity to make personal grants has grown considerably over the past 10 years. And the frequency of my grant making has increased to the point where it takes up a considerable amount of my time. So these really factors have guided me to a point where I am assessing my personal philanthropic efforts and figuring out how to institutionalize my giving. So yes, so it's important to kind of also on a personal level institutionalize your giving as you do on a, let's say, a bigger level, let's say a foundation level. And I think we need to regard our giving as we regard our investments. So as we kind of, you know, really look into every single investment and every single number and research and look at data when it comes to investments, I think the same goes for, you know, our own personal philanthropy and our grants. We need to look at our grants in the same way that we kind of analyze and measure our personal, our investments.
I think it's very an interesting perspective, and thank you very much, Muna, for sharing this, because essentially, if we start looking at philanthropy as social investments, we would more and more expect them to yield a social return. And that's when we would be able to put together a strategy and optimize it accordingly so that we reach to the outcomes that we desire. So thank you for this. Now, turning my attention to Dana, because Shefa Fund chose a unique route in structuring its giving, which is a donor advised fund. Could you please take us through how did you come with this decision? How are the family values as well and DNA reflected in it?
Yes, of course. Thank you for this question, Michaela, and thank you to the Pearl Initiative for inviting me on this panel. It's really a true honor and pleasure to speak alongside Mona and yourself, Michaela. So I'll just take a little step back too and introduce you to the Shifa Fund. So the Shifa Fund, for those of you that don't know it, was established in 2013 in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And its main focus is on global health projects, particularly in the Middle East and Africa. And our approach is really grounded on the principles of learning, collaboration, and giving. So really learning by doing and giving together as a pooled group of like-minded donors. So it was really based on a donor collaborative approach. So multiple donors coming together and giving to causes in global health that we care about, and we can scale impact and learn together. It was established really not to reinvent the wheel, but to work with experts. And this is why we partnered with the Gates Foundation to really leverage on their expertise and their incredible know-how. And this has been truly instrumental to us. So since inception to date, we've worked in 17 different countries. We have worked with 18 different donors and impacted 16 million lives, which is mostly children and families. And maybe I'll just walk you through some of the projects that we've done so you get an idea of some of the work that we did. So we recently worked on a project with the UNHCR in the refugee camp in Jordan, the Azraq refugee camp. And there we provided a hospital where we were co-funded with the Gates Foundation for the Saving Newborn Lives project, specifically for maternal and newborn, to reduce newborn deaths. We also worked on the meningitis A vaccination campaign that was rolled out also in collaboration with the Gates Foundation and the World Health Organization, which vaccinated over hundreds of thousands of people. And then we did something interesting in Saudi Arabia, which was working on a research and development project with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine for a neglected tropical disease that I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's called cutaneous leishmaniasis. It's difficult to pronounce, but it's a sandfly bite which really creates really painful scars across the body, and it's really debilitating. And so this is something we put a lot of effort into working with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine to find a cure and vaccine for. We also worked with the International Medical Corps on water and sanitation projects, because as we know, clean water or unclean water can actually spread a lot of diseases. So we worked on a project with them in Yemen, and we worked with the END Fund very closely for a lot of neglected tropical diseases across Africa and the Middle East. And finally, more recently, as the COVID outbreak has happened, we changed our strategy and reflected a lot of our efforts also on emergency relief for COVID across Africa, and with the Gates Foundation and Oxfam in Yemen as well to support. So this, I hope, gave you a good glimpse into who we are as the Shifa Fund. It was important for us to institutionalize it, really to have a structure in place, a transparent and professional structure in place to really be able to have a clear strategy and maximize our giving and serve those most in need. So I hope this gave you a good brief to answer the question about why we chose to go on the route of a donor advised fund. So as I said, the Shifa Fund is really based on a collaborative approach. So this was the basis of why we chose to go with a donor advised fund, because it allowed us to have that structure in place of having multiple donors. So we chose to work with the National Philanthropic Trust, which is based out of the UK, and they support us with everything from the process of receiving the funds from our donors to deploying the grants to our grantees on the ground. and they have been an incredible support in alleviating a lot of the administrative burdens. So it gave us and the Gates Foundation more effort to really focus on program evaluations, on the strategy, and work closely with our donors and the NGOs, and also, of course, looking at measurement frameworks that are in place. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela.
Yeah, so thank you, Dana. It's what I feel is that it's very interesting that we have the three perspectives. So we have the foundation level giving, we have the donor advised fund, and we also have the personal giving. And regardless of which one of them we focus our attention on, the same areas surface when it comes to institutionalizing giving. Is one, having a robust governance in place. The second area, really measuring impact and how do we go about, which frameworks do we choose, and so on. And the third area, which you both mentioned, is also collaborations. Now, before we delve into these three focus areas, what I wanted to ask you is, as we were speaking last week as well, transparency also plays always a key role in inspiring other actors as well to support the ecosystem of philanthropy. And what we know from the region is that giving is very well ingrained in the culture. However, it's mostly been done as from behind the shadow, silent donations, rather than really speaking about what we are doing, because we don't really want to boast about our giving initiatives. So maybe just having a quick perception from whichever would like to take this question, and to see how can we steer away from this private nature of giving and be more transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak here. I think that, again, we live in a world that's a digital world. And we also live in a world where the next gen are doing all their research online. And I think it's so important to have that transparency, whether it be from a reporting structure. And so, I mean, if you really think about it, which are the charities out there that you're really impressed with? It's usually the charities that are very transparent in their numbers and very transparent in their reporting, and their communication is usually spot on. And so I think that this is something that is so important for us in the Middle East to consider. And I think that we can really learn from the likes of the global foundations out there, where, you know, everything can be found online, and information is there at your fingertips. And I think that enhances the giving, because there are a lot more people who then are interested in, you know, understanding what you're doing, and they understand the impact and efficiency of your work. And so transparency is so important. And communication needn't be in the manner that, you know, we think it to be, which is like boasting about your giving. It's more about sharing information about the different causes out there and how we can make a difference. The whole idea of giving is really problem solving. So I think that problem solving can be enhanced so much more if we had better communications and better reporting and transparency and data. And I'm sure we're going to speak about data later on. But I think that this is so important. And I think the next generation really do understand that. And it's really important for us to embrace that. It's really important to have that within the DNA of a foundation or a nonprofit.
Thank you, Mona, and I think that you've rightly pointed out that really communication and building those strong narratives and compelling narratives by combining qualitative and quantitative data is what is going to support us put together more storytelling about philanthropy in general, and then delve into the areas of impact so that we then inspire other actors as well in the region. Now, I also want to engage our audience, because I see that there are also some questions going into the areas of impact. So maybe starting just with our first poll, and I just hope that my tech skills won't let me down now. Now, if everyone can see this, if you can let us know if your organization is looking to optimize the effectiveness of their giving. Perfect, I see some results already coming in. This is going to be very helpful for us, particularly on the areas that we want to further address. Thank you everyone for participating. And now let me just close this poll. Can everyone see the results now on their screen?
Yes.
So we have 90% of the attendees that are mentioning that they are looking to enhance the effectiveness of their giving. So I think that now it's the right time to really drill further into the topic and address the first area, which actually is, in light of everything that we've discussed, impact measurement. And similarly to sustainability in organizations, when we really look at data and when we start measuring impact, we can be more strategic. We can optimize our giving strategies. We can choose then where our capital is mostly needed and deploy it accordingly, and also choose whether we need to continue with certain projects. However, impact measurement is quite complex and requires a lot of effort, particularly because there is no commonly accepted framework. And I see that there are also some questions coming in the audience from this. So we have the SDGs as a framework to which organizations can align to. We have theory of change that numerous foundations have started to look at in measuring afterwards their outcomes, SROI analysis, and so on. So maybe turning this to you, Dana, first, how do you assess impact and how do you go about it in order to evaluate the effectiveness of your philanthropy?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think this is definitely a really important question because measuring impact is so critical and so pivotal to know how you can enhance and optimize your giving strategies. But then again, it should also not be a burden. Sorry, excuse the light. It should not be a burden on the donor or on the grantee. So it's when we at the Shifa Fund, we really also work with our experts and work very closely with the grantees to look at the measurement frameworks that they have in place and also look at the challenges that they have to see how we can work together to find the best frameworks that in place to be able to measure. But unfortunately, a lot of the times nonprofits just don't have the capacity to measure. They don't have, they don't have extensive monitoring and evaluation criteria in place. Whether it's not having enough people in place, they can't cover the expenses. So this is why when we really look at grants, we also look at covering some of the admin expenses to really ensure that we have the best people on the ground, but also get the right reporting and the measurements that we need to evaluate the effectiveness of our giving. And you mentioned this, which is really right, is that it varies per project. There really isn't a, one kind of criteria that could work for all different programs. So for us, I mean, the most essential thing we always look at is having a positive social impact. At the end of the day, this is what is the bottom line, and impacting lives. So how many lives have really, really impacted? A lot of the time, we also look at price of the product because we're in healthcare. So was the product inexpensive enough to have the largest scale and reach the highest number of people? And also because we're in healthcare, we look at efficient delivery mechanisms in place. So for example, do they have mass drug administrative campaigns in place to scale and reach the highest number of people? I'll just give a quick example of the meningitis A vaccination project we worked on. So on that project, as I mentioned, it reached hundreds of thousands of people at the end of the day. And that's the impact we look at, and that's the key kind of measurement framework. But at the end, we take a deeper dive and we see that the cost of the vaccine itself was $1 and the cost of the delivery was 50 cents. So together, to get the meningitis vaccine to one person cost $1.50. And that allowed it to really maximize impact. But it really differs, and with other organizations, maybe we look more at the efficient delivery mechanisms. So I wish there was one kind of answer I could give you that could, be a holistic approach, but it really does vary per project, and it's a learning journey. So we have to work closely with the grantees and the NGOs on the ground to learn where their challenges are and how we can bridge that together.
No, you're absolutely right. And I love it that you've really mentioned that it differs per project, because if you look at education, there is one way that you would measure impact on. If you look at healthcare, then you would look at other factors as well, depending on how that impacts the lives of those that benefited from the aid. So now if we are speaking about the beneficiaries, Mona, I think that this was another interesting topic that we were discussing last week, which is the need of engage even further the primary stakeholders of our aid, which are our immediate beneficiaries, and how valuable obtaining information from them is in really analyzing the impact that we have. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on this, and if there are any examples that you would like to reflect on.
So again, a very vital question, and going back to the point really about problem solving. Problem solving really requires you to get good data. It also requires you to understand nuances. And also, I would say, to engage with the people that you're actually trying to help, as you just mentioned. And so I think when people look at data, they overcomplicate it in their minds. And sometimes it's something that they feel is an impossible kind of, something that they can impossibly not reach as an organization. And I think it's really important to kind of think about it from a point of view that you probably are not the expert in getting that good data, but there are a lot of organizations out there that can help you with getting that data on the recipients of your donations. So I was recently speaking to the Acumen Fund, and they guided me towards a very good data-driven company called 60 Decibels. And what 60 Decibels does is that it has around 150 researchers, and they conduct local language voice surveys in 35 countries. And this is such an important point to consider, particularly because speaking in the local language to the recipients of your donation is so crucial. Because it doesn't make sense to go there speaking to them, let's say in English, and their English may not be, they don't understand English properly. So it's important to have the local language, and it's important to gather that data from the recipients of your donations. I think a lot of foundations and charities out there write checks and send wire transfers, and even individuals do the same, but they don't really think about, is that impact there towards the recipients of that money? And this is where good data comes into place. Again, similarly, I've been looking at the Zovigian partnership in Lebanon that do a lot of research on the macro and micro level in terms of the recipients of the donations, and how are we impacting them in terms of what we'd like to impact. Is it really efficient? Is that, for example, charity that we are collaborating on, is that charity really doing its work in the most efficient manner? Because at the end of the day, that's what we'd like to achieve. We'd like to solve the problem of these recipients. So good data is absolutely, vital. And I think that instead of us overcomplicating it in our minds in terms of not being able to achieve this data, we go to the experts. It's a really good investment for your charity or your foundation, and it will help you reach the impact, as Dana was speaking about, the impact that you're trying to achieve.
Certainly, and this makes me think, because there is always a quote from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum that I always reflect upon, and he said that giving is defined by the difference we make in someone else's life, in a society or in a nation. And I think just adding on to this, both of the areas that Dana and yourself have touched upon, which is really involving our beneficiaries, understanding our data, is how we will be able to scale our impact to ensure that it's effective, and then consider what are the next steps moving forward. And since we are speaking of scaling impact, I would actually like to call up our second poll and ask our audience if their organization has a strategy in place to scale their impact. So I see that participants are already voting. This is actually a crucial question because data is one of the factors that would support us to scale impact. And then I want us to delve into another area which you've mentioned. So I think that now this is closed. And let me share the results. It's very interesting. So we have 54% of the participants that said yes and 46% that said no. So quite an equal distribution. Maybe in line with this, Muna, we can continue with yourself and elaborate a little bit further on how important collaborations are in scaling our impact. And the reason why I'm asking you this is because besides your personal giving and besides the foundation level giving, you're also sitting on other non-profit boards in the region, and you would probably have quite a lot of examples to leverage upon in elaborating on the topic of collaborations.
Yeah. So again, collaborations, you know, I've always believed in collaborations, and the reason being, I feel there's so much more that we can do when we collaborate, and we can waste less time and resources and really utilize our time to be more impactful. So I'm on the board of the Young Arab Leaders. I'm also on the board of Endeavour and also Emirates Foundation. And I would say that the common denominator, or let's say the common thread between these three non-profit organizations is youth and entrepreneurship. So through workshops and events and sharing mentors and resources, we've been able to collaborate on all three. So I'll give you a very good example. If Emirates Foundation is looking to create a workshop on financial literacy for youth, we go back to Young Arab Leaders and look into the network of, you know, successful financiers there, and take that network as mentors towards these Emirates Foundation workshops. And so I think that it's really important to kind of think about how certain groups are good, let's say, at creating content, and other groups are really good at delivering events. And so it's really important to kind of understand what you're good at. Think about, you know, what you're trying to achieve in terms of your impact, and then collaborate on that, because that means that your resources and your time is used more efficiently. Now, naturally, I understand that there's a sense of ownership that comes with working on particular philanthropic efforts. And so sometimes people have that sense of, or that notion that they'd like to say that they solved a certain problem or they started a certain program and they successfully did it. But it's really something that you need to manage, because if you'd like to be more impactful, I think the way to be more impactful is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. I cannot stress more on this. And there's so much more that can be achieved if you do collaborate, instead of kind of reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch with your own programs. And the biggest foundations in the world really collaborate with, you know, with charities and go to charities and give out their grants to those charities, because those charities really are doing the work 24/7, and those charities eat and breathe, you know, on ground. Whereas you as a foundation, for example, have the resources, of course, and that's where your importance comes into place. But I think that it's important to say that I'm not the expert in what they do, but I can collaborate with them and I can help achieve what I'd like to achieve as well as what they'd like to achieve in the most efficient manner.
Absolutely. And also, I think that this is an area which we've greatly seen during the pandemic as well, and that enabled us to really have a nimble response. We've seen not only in the philanthropic sector, but in general, more collaborations taking place between governments, private sector, philanthropies, so that we can deploy aid where it's mostly needed. And to your point as well, so that we can reduce that duplication of efforts and really leverage on the expertise of each single actor. So in line with this, then I know that collaborations are very much valued by Shefa Fund. Maybe you can also shed some light on how have collaborations supported your giving strategies to be more effective, and also how can collaborations really enable scaling impact?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, I mean, collaborations really are deeply rooted in the Shefa Fund. You know, we collaborate on every level, from the donors, because we're a multiple pool of donors, all the way to our strategic partners with the Gates, which we heavily rely on their expertise, all the way to the grantees on the ground. So, really, I mean, collaboration for us is so pivotal, and we don't believe in doing anything on our own. The power of collaboration, bringing like-minded people together, you can really solve so many problems that are even neglected by others. And a point that you mentioned, which is so important, is duplication of efforts. So we really believe in scaling impact together, so you avoid duplicating efforts. Share expertise, and this also allows you to set much more ambitious goals and targets. So the partnership that we have with the Gates Foundation, we really do look at scaling impact together, especially on the side of avoiding duplication of efforts. So we work together on so many different projects which we co-funded together, from the vaccinations to the hospital in the refugee camps, to the polio eradication program. And we've seen that when you come together, you share experiences, you just grow so much more together. And we also felt the same from our donors, because we collaborate not only strategically, but we also learn together, and we go on the ground together to visit a lot of the projects that we've done. We see it firsthand, and that really has a lasting impact, and it's a more sustainable impact also on the donors to participate in the long term. And yeah, so collaboration truly is grounded in the Shefa Fund and partnerships as well.
Thank you. And I think that if we were really to look at the points that we've discussed so far, we first need to again emphasize the necessity of collaborating more and leveraging the others' expertise as well, in order to be able to go further faster, basically. Also to look at how we measure our impact, to put together those compelling narratives in order to inspire others as well in the region, so that we slowly go towards institutionalizing philanthropy within the Gulf region. Now, because we've touched on these areas, and there is, and we focused a lot on the present, and now I want to also get your thoughts on the future of the sector. Before we do that, I would really love to engage our audience with the last poll. I'm also conscious that we start to run a little bit out of time. So if our audience can see this, just let us know if your organization would benefit from tools and resources designed to guide your giving. I think that this is another important area that we need to address, because everyone has a different set of expertise and knowledge, and having the tools and resources would be really important. So now I think that I'll just give it a couple more seconds. And let me close this. Once again, thank you everyone for participating. So the answer is yes. The vast majority are saying that, basically 92%, that they would really benefit from tools and resources. So I think that Yasmin, in the ending remarks, you would also cover on this, but I can't emphasize enough the actual vehicle, which is the circle that the Pearl Initiative has put together, and I really strongly encourage you to connect further, because that's exactly what they are trying to achieve in the region, to provide with the tools and resources that can optimize giving strategies and guide giving. So now, since we are speaking about guiding giving, and we've touched upon already a few times on the pandemic, maybe Mona, just a little bit of an outlook from your side in terms of the current situation. Do you think that the pandemic will further accelerate this change in the behavior of philanthropists in general?
Well, I believe that the pandemic has really sort of made us dive deep into our own personal kind of intentions. and in terms of how efficient we are and how relevant we are. And we spoke about this in terms of the Pearl Initiative, for example, has been very relevant at this point during COVID-19. A lot of essential webinars and talks came to the table. And so, yes, I feel that our relevance is very important, more than ever. More than ever. And again, what does that mean? It means, are we adding value at the end of the day? Are we impactful as a non-profit or a profit? And again, you know, governance in philanthropy is what we're speaking about today. But then again, the Pearl Initiative has really, you know, emphasized on the word governance. And I think this pandemic has really emphasized on how, again, how are we structured? Is our governance in place? Are we relevant? Are we adding value? What is our social impact? I think these are all questions that perhaps we kind of didn't really emphasize upon before you know, the pandemic. And I think that post-pandemic, this is something that we really value. And I'd really like to thank the Pearl Initiative for all the tools, the talks, the education that has come out of the Pearl Initiative and continues to do so. I certainly have learned a lot from the talks that I've been part of. So I think this is something so essential in the Middle East, and I'm so pleased to have a platform that helps us reach to the best sort of governance stage of our organizations.
And I love it that you've mentioned that it is a journey, because essentially that's what we need to acknowledge, that we can't be perfect from the very beginnings, that we are trying to put together all of this. And just building a little bit on this, because I see that there is a question coming also from our audience. If you were to address one of the areas that we've discussed throughout the session, be it data, be it more transparency, or robust governance, or collaborations, which one would you think that we should tackle first in order to become more strategic in our giving?
This is for me or for Dana?
For yourself, and then we'll turn to Dana.
Right. I mean, I think I would say that you know, proper governance and reporting is the first thing that we need to look at, really. You know, other things can fall into place, but really focusing and analyzing your entire governance structure and reporting structure and transparency, I think this is an essential basic. So this is where we need to start. And then after that comes, you know, whether you're collaborating with the right people or whether your communications you know, are in place. But I think that to start off with, it really is governance and transparency.
Thank you, Mona. Now, building on this, Dana, turning to you, if there is any other area that you would like to add on to this, and also a question, because you are representing as well the next generation, and we always speak about the importance of involving even more the next generation in philanthropy. And in the light of this, how would you say that the next generation could also play a key role in further shaping the ecosystem?
Exactly. So I think the next generation, involving the next generation, is really fundamental in achieving the long-term sustainability of philanthropic initiatives and in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's true, I am the next generation, and I see that there's really a huge appetite from our generation to be involved. But a lot of the times, oftentimes, the question is how? How can we be involved? And I was faced with that exact same question. And the first answer that I realized is that I have to educate myself on what are the causes out there? How can I help? What are the tools? What does philanthropy mean? What do organizations like NGOs and grassroots do? So that point and that piece on education has been also really important for us as a family. So we, separate to the Shifa Fund, we did a collaboration again with Northeastern University, who have a course, a dedicated course on philanthropy, part of their social impact lab. And we started this course and we brought it to Saudi because we thought it was so important to teach really on these fundamentals of philanthropy, and potentially even encourage this generation to find a career in philanthropy, because NGOs and philanthropists need talents to support them to grow and have the highest level of impact. And we really did have an incredible amount of appetite from the students, and it's been so overwhelming and really positive. So that was a great outcome. And the second step is involvement. So really getting yourself involved on the ground, visiting the NGOs, giving your time. Sometimes giving your time and your effort is even more valuable than contributing financially. So we don't have to think, I don't have the means to give at this point. We're still young, early in our career, but we can give our time. And that has been truly the most inspiring. And even personally, it changed my outlook on a lot of things and opened my eyes up to the power of volunteering and working on the ground. So these would be my two suggestions.
No, I think that these are very valuable insight, and especially because we always refer to the next generation as the purpose-driven generation, and involving them from early stages and supporting them to discover this purpose by going more on the ground and choosing in which direction they would like to further support and further take action. I think it's going to support us to really change and steer away from the current status of philanthropy and become more effective. Now, I know that we only have 5 more minutes, and I would like to also open it up to our virtual floor if there are more questions, so that we can cover any areas that we haven't addressed. I see that we do have some more on transparency and the use of technology, particularly blockchain, to control the funding allocation, which is a very interesting point, because we always try to leverage the technology to support us have all the data assessed properly. So maybe who would like to take this question on the technology side?
I mean, I can talk a little.
I'll leave it to Dana.
There's very little I think I can talk about blockchain, but I think on the point of using technology, it's really vital for us to use our resources today as much as possible, because we as philanthropists also need to minimize our expenses. We want to be able to have, the best back-end systems to measure and do the reporting, and at the same time, on the NGO side, they should try and use resources to minimize their expenses too. And on a second, and have, of course, accurate data and reporting, because this is really key, as we discussed a lot today. And on the second point, I think it's just really important to use our resources and the tools for communication and to spread awareness, to educate on what the topics that we're doing, and find ways, again, to collaborate and not duplicate efforts. So, I mean, this is really, from my perspective, is that there's so many tools out there, and we should use them as much as we can. Even if sometimes the investment upfront is a little high, it pays off in the long term. I hope that answered.
Perfect. Thank you. I see that there are no further questions coming from our audience. So with this in mind, I would like to thank you both, Muna and Dana. It was an amazing conversation, and it was wonderful to have you here. So now handing it over back to Yasmin for the ending remarks. Thank you once again, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much, Dana and Muna, for participating in the panel, and Mahela for doing a fantastic job of moderating the session. There's obviously only a limit. There's only so much we can cover in an hour, but I think you've done a fantastic job of touching upon very important topics, including transparency, data collection, impact evaluation, and of course, the role of collaboration. We've learned today the value of looking at grants in the same way we would at business investment, and looking more critically at inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Our panelists today have also stressed the need to be more transparent, particularly in light of modern digitization and the power of data. This is also linked to the effective evaluation of the impact of giving, a critical step that philanthropists need to undertake to continue delivering impactful societal change. After all, philanthropy is about problem solving, as Muna kindly mentioned, and in the face of today's challenges, we need to do this more effectively and with better results. Dana and Muna highlighted the role of collaboration in scaling impact a number of times, by reducing the duplication of efforts and co-funding results-driven organisations and charities. So thank you for your wonderful insights. Today's session is being held as part of our launch event for our circles. So obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in the sector, on the ground, across the Gulf region, and the Pearl Initiative are doing their part to try and push the agenda forward and lead to the greater change that we need to see in the philanthropic sector. As part of that initiative, and as part of our Governance and Philanthropy programme that's supported by the Gates Foundation, we have launched our Circle. So it's a platform dedicated to donors that are giving in any sort of capacity across the Gulf region, better impact in their giving. I urge you, please do have a look at that platform. You can access it directly from our website, or alternatively, it's just circle.pearlinitiative.org. And it houses numerous resources that we're pulling together, and we continue to build and upload to meet the needs of the sector. So if there's any feedback, if there's any areas where we can support you, please do let us know. In addition, we also have a Circle community as Pearl Initiative, where we're bringing together actors in the philanthropic realm. So it's the actors themselves, the donors, not necessarily, well, not the advisors or anyone advising on the impact on giving in the region. The purpose is so we can all collaborate and learn from each other and learn what we're all doing, and hopefully optimize giving and reduce duplication of efforts, etc. And also support you where we can at best. So we're trying to do our piece, do our bit to the sector. If there's any way we can support you, please do let us know. And once again, thank you for tuning in. And to our panelists for the insights. Stay safe, everybody, and look forward to having you at all our other events. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.